Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of ShatterCast. Today we have some very fun, wonderful things to talk about, but I just need to have a quick snack first. Derek, can you ask me what I'm eating for lunch?
Sure. Hey, John, what are you eating for lunch?
Asgard.
Let's just say
What are you doing?
your salad is Asgard.
No,
in this scenario.
it's not Asgard. That's
it's
my
a metaphor.
lunch.
Just hang in there. Before
Did you say Asgard?
That might have too much ranch in it.
He's suffering for you people, for you viewers.
That's right. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of ShatterCast. We are going to be talking about Loki, the television show, and if my joke about the salad being Asgard didn't make sense to you, that means you probably haven't watched all of Loki, and you should probably not finish watching this episode because we're going to have a lot of spoilers in it. And if you did finish watching Loki and the salad joke didn't make sense to you, like
Probably forgot a scene.
like one of the people on this panel who was very confused a moment ago. It was from a very funny moment in like episode 2 or 3. Highly recommend going back and finding it. The salad is Asgard. So yeah, thoughts. I will start. Usually I kick it over to one of you guys, but I know what both of you think, so I'm gonna do something different this time, and I'm gonna start. And I'm gonna say that I liked it. Big surprise. I mean, I'm pretty sure every time something comes out from Marvel, my great, big, profound takeaway is it was good. Yeah. I will say this. Again, this is super spoilery. You've been warned. When Loki died at the beginning of Infinity War, I was one of those fans that was very upset, because I love Loki as a character. I loved how he had drifted from villain to tortured anti-hero kind of character, who had a good streak mostly when it benefited him, but he seemed to have to do a couple selfless things. And then him standing up to Thanos at the end was like the most heroic thing he had ever did, and he got his neck crushed, for that. And so I was a little bummed, and then I was just like, meh. And then Endgame comes around and Loki escapes New York with a Tesseract. And I'm like, oh, yay, we get Loki back. But we're getting the villain Loki back, who hasn't had any of this character development. And I felt like the show did a really good job of redeveloping what we had seen Loki go through over several years in just a few days through his experiences in TVA, seeing the alternate timeline of what was supposed to happen with him escaping New York after being prisoner for a while, eventually dying at the hands of Thanos, and you see an actual emotional reaction to what Loki is seeing. Like, he's like trying not to cry. And it's not fake, because he's completely by himself when he sees this. He sees this after almost escaping the TVA, right? And so there's just this genuine reaction that he's having, and I like that. And I like that scene a lot, because I was really not looking forward to having villain Loki all over again and having to go back through that character arc. But I felt like they did a really good job with it in Loki. There's a lot of other things that happened in Loki. That's the main thing I wanted to touch on to get the conversation going. Hannah, how about you?
I agree. I really like that they brought him back and they were able to take him through the character arc just in a different way. And I don't think that the Loki we have now is necessarily the same Loki we had in Infinity War, but almost better, I would probably think, as far as like how far he's gone in towards more selfless direction.
Yeah, this Loki does feel a little bit more altruistic than the Loki we had in Infinity War. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and especially the when he said to the Sylvie, the female version of him,
Yep.
the variant. I don't know how much I have to explain. That you know, he doesn't want a throne. He doesn't want power or that kind of thing. I actually believed him.
Yeah.
In that, and I don't think he's like necessarily the best person or like good guy now, but you know, he was making some great points in the last episode where he was like, if we do this, it's gonna probably be a lot worse for us and everyone else. And so part of it was him looking out for other people, but also looking out for himself. And so there's still a lot of complexity to his character that I think I really like, and a lot to explore there, a lot that has been explored. And I really like Tom Hiddleston as an actor. I think he does an excellent job at conveying really complex emotions in his face and just in his body language in general. And I saw that throughout this entire season, and he will continue to be a great pick for Loki. Like, he's just, like I said, Loki's a really complex character, and he's really good at conveying those complexities. I also love the introduction of the new characters like Sylvie and Mobius, and even Ravonna Renslayer, and B-15, and just like all of the different things that we saw them go through. And they didn't put a name on the guy who they encounter in the finale, but a lot of people.
Well, some know him as the Conqueror.
The Conqueror, yeah.
Which kind of sealed the deal on who it was.
But I think he was a bit of a surprise. He was a bit of he caused some confusion when he first showed up, like when those elevators doors opened and he was there. I was like, wait, that's not at all what I was expecting.
Yep.
But the longer the episode went on, the more I was like, okay, I can accept this. I kind of like this guy in a entertainment kind of view, not necessarily this is a good guy or whatever. Yeah. So again, great casting choices, great characterization. That's kind of one of the things I always really like and appreciate about Marvel shows and movies.
Yeah, and going along with what you said, two quick things that I want to hear from Derek. You mentioned his sort of final moments with Sylvie, and we're assuming it was King the Conqueror. I'd be very surprised if it wasn't, because I mean it definitely was, right? So in that chamber, he has that moment where he's like trying at the very end, like he sort of, I don't know what Loki calls it, but he disapparates and then reappears right as she's swinging the blade. And the one of the final things that he says to her when he says, I don't want the throne, I don't want power, any of that, he says, I just want you to be okay. And that's like the first time we've really seen Loki care about someone else to his own detriment. Like, he'll help other people if it also helps him. But at the end of the day, he'll save himself, even if he has to look down on a whole group of people dying and be kind of sad that they're dying. But hey, at least he's surviving. Whereas this is a total opposite for him. And he's driven by his care for Sylvie and his desire for her to be okay. And I thought that was really touching. And like you said, it felt genuine. And I think that he wasn't being deceitful in that moment. Similarly, the other point I wanted to make was when we saw Kang, and it became immediately clear to me that it was Kang. At first, I was not super happy with how they were portraying Kang, because it felt a lot to me like how they portrayed Mandarin in Iron Man 3, and they were taking this awesome bad guy with really complex story and a lot of darkness, and they're playing him for laughs, because he kind of seemed like he was supposed to be comedic relief. but then he got stabbed and died. And so obviously that was one variant of King, and we're going to meet another, if not several, probably one that more fits the trope of King the Conqueror, but we'll see. Maybe not.
Maybe we'll meet a variant of Mandarin.
Maybe we'll meet a variant of Mandarin. Well, you know, we recently recorded an episode on Black Widow, and the thing that I was waiting to say until we talked about Loki was, if we're opening up the multiverse, I wouldn't be surprised if Scarlett Johansson continues in the MCU, even if only cameos as other universes' Black Widows, but maybe also Black Widow returning for an actual movie or two. But I feel like they could definitely use that as a way to bring her back. Then I think you're going to get into the question of, does that cheapen her death and all subsequent deaths of anyone else in the MCU? Now that we've opened up the multiverse, can everyone just come back? And then is there no actual emotional significance to a character death? Which I think is a fair question to ask.
Right.
I
think they have to be very selective about how they do it because they obviously did it for Loki.
Yeah.
You know, Loki died. This is his second time dying in the MCU.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, he's back again. And are they doing this because they love him? Like, he's a popular character? Or are they doing this because it makes sense? And I think, yeah, they're probably doing it because it's a popular character, but it also, they found a way for it to make sense. And it isn't just time travel.
Right.
They like
but
actually
if it keeps happening several times,
a complex
then it could be a
story.
problem.
Yeah.
Right now it works, but don't abuse it. Derek, what about you? What are some of your thoughts? Let's start with we mostly talked about good with a little bit of concern. So why don't you go ahead and do the same? So start with like good things, and then maybe finish it with a little twist at the end, things you're not happy about.
Sure. Overall, I thought the series was okay. I appreciate what they were trying to do. I felt it didn't necessarily stick the landing for me. I'll get to that in a little bit. You mentioned the multiverse. I think one thing going to it, I was surprised that they ended up going with the multiverse route, because we know Doctor Strange, the next movie, is going to be about the multiverse, and Scarlet Witch can be part of that. So I thought she was probably the key to unlocking the multiverse. So just a little curious, like how everything's going to line up, but we'll find out soon. As far as Loki itself, I really like the premise of the show. I like when things have consequences, or when you find out what happens after the fact. And so when Loki steals the cube in Endgame, we know he goes somewhere, but we don't know where. And so I like the idea that they have a whole series following Loki, like this is what happens right after that, and how they introduce the TVA and all that stuff. I thought that was, again, a good premise for the show. When they were doing the trailers for the various Disney Plus shows that were coming out, to be honest, this Marvel show, at first I wasn't super excited about it, but then I saw more trailers, but I was like, oh, this is actually kind of a cool premise. Let's see what they do with this. So I like where they started. I like the various variants of Loki. It's a very good shout out to the comics. I like that we had classic Loki and the classic garb and stuff. And he came out to be a really cool character who had like all these powers of illusion. He like recreated Asgard. And
that
stuff.
was
like,
amazing.
That was awesome.
Like when someone said something about like using a dagger, he was like, "You don't realize how powerful you are. You don't need that stuff." And I was like, "Okay, that's an old guy making his line." But then he was right.
Yeah, and I thought that was a cool pivotal moment, like just this idea that the Lokis don't always realize how powerful they are. And I think, to relate to real life real fast, I think sometimes we don't realize how capable we are, or how much talent we have, or what God has even given us, because we're afraid, or we haven't unlocked that somehow. And so it's kind of cool to see different variants of Loki who are able to do different things, I guess. I like young Loki. I thought he was cool. I really like alligator Loki.
Alligator Loki.
Alligator with horns looks cool. It was really cool. And I really like Sylvie. I think she could turn out to be a really cool character, a cool take on Loki. She had different powers. When she was mind controlling people, I was like, how can a Loki do that? Because remember, in the original Avengers movie, Loki did that, but he had to use a staff. And so I was really confused, and it was kind of cool how she had unlocked that power as well. It's a little weird falling in love with a variant of yourself, but we're not going to go too deep into that.
They address that too. They're like, that's weird. Like, of course you would fall in love with yourself.
Yeah. It's the ultimate narcissist, right? The only person he ever falls in love with is a female version of himself.
You like her. What?
You like her. Does she like you?
Was she pruned?
I mean, no wonder you have no clue what cause and nexus have been momentous. Both of you are just swooning over
Mobius,
each other, I guess.
tell
If
me
the
the truth.
apocalypse, two variants of the same being, especially you, forming this kind of sick, twisted romantic relationship, that's pure chaos. That could break reality. It's breaking my reality right now. What a incredible seismic narcissist.
So it's funny, but yeah. So, and again, as you guys mentioned, I really appreciate Loki's story arc, because when he first starts, again, he's a villain. He's doing all this stuff. And he even admits to Morbius, he doesn't necessarily really like what he's doing, but he feels he has to keep up the facade, and it's almost him striving to be liked and loved and all this stuff. But he's doing all these bad things for attention. I think of a kid who, shouts out and they're doing bad stuff, but they just really want someone to care for them. And as both of you guys were saying, I like how towards the end with the final battle with Sylvie, he was concerned for Sylvie, but he was also like, hey, before we make a rash decision, let's wait. He kept saying, let's wait and think about how this is going to impact others. And for that, to me, that was the key change for Loki. It was no longer just how this is going to impact me. It's like, how is my actions going to impact others? And I think that's something important for all of us to think about. So and the production quality as far as the sets, and I think I heard they use the virtual sets like they use in Mandalorian, and more shows are using that, so that was really cool. Just the weapons, the armor, the CGI. I thought they threw a lot of money at the show, so that was really cool. So those were some of my positives. Had some things that didn't like as much. Do you want me to go straight into that, or do you guys want to?
Yeah, I think we both hit some good things. So now we'll start from you and go back across.
Sure. Some of the reasons why I felt the show didn't quite do it completely for me is, to what Han said, I think Tom Hiddleston is an amazing actor. And although I like the variant concepts of different versions of Loki, I wanted to see Loki have the chance to play more versions of himself, like Tom Hiddleston have the chance of playing. We got a few of that gangster Loki and stuff like that. I was kind of, even if it was played for laughs, I think of Eddie Murphy does a lot of movies where he's playing different variants of himself. I think stuff like that would have been hilarious. So something like that.
Yeah, well, along those same lines, at first when you had mentioned that before we started recording, I was like, no, I like what they did, but then I was like, I think if they had struck a balance between the two, if they had kept some of the ones that they had, alligator Loki and old Loki, and of course female Loki, but then they sprinkled more in there because obviously they had that gangster that Tom Hiddleston played. I would have loved to seen, so there was that one Loki that was kind of a mix of Thor and Heimdall and Loki,
that was
all in one.
They never addressed it either. It was all three of them in the same person. It was so confusing.
I would have loved for there to be a Loki that was kind of more like Thor, because Tom Hiddleston originally auditioned for Thor.
True.
So that would have been fun to see.
Yeah.
To be fair, I did not go back and pause when he was in front of the great crowd of Lokis, similar to our great cloud of witnesses that we're surrounded by.
Wow.
I really need to pause that scene and really see all the different Lokis they have, because there was 25 of them there near the end, and I need to see what all those Lokis were, because I haven't done that yet.
Continue.
Similarly, again, I really appreciate Loki's change of heart and his character arc. I kind of felt the Loki we ended up getting was a little bit one-toned, a little bit one note. Again, Tom Hiddleston is so good at playing different things. Loki's so mischievous as a character. I guess I wanted to see more of him using that for good. Even, I think in the last episode, I wanted one more battle where Loki was using all these powers he had unlocked in some cool way. If there was one more bad guy they faced before they saw the He Who Remains or something like that, where he could tap into the classic Loki's image, building, or Sylvie's, mind control, or just his own illusion stuff a little bit more, to see how Loki has grown in power. And also he's really good at tricking people. So how could he use that almost like Black Widow does, for good? So I was kind of looking for a little bit more of that. I felt some of the episodes were uneven. There are some episodes I really enjoyed. I think episode 3 like was the first time it was really clicking for me. I was like, oh man, this is so cool, I can't wait. And episode 5 was probably my favorite episode.
Episode 5, I know it was the second to last one, but that's the one that ends with the ark exploding and they're all just kind of standing around super dejected, right? Or was that episode 4?
That's episode 3 or 4.
That
Episode 5
No.
is where they control the Alios, the big monster. Alios, and then it opens up and they see like the castle tower, and we don't know what's happened after that.
Right,
and I'll speak to that in a second. I felt some episodes had a lot of some had some fun nods to it. Some were just kind of a lot of exposition dumps. And it was just a couple people talking and got a little bit long. I was expecting like Doctor Who meets Guardian of the Galaxy, like Mitch meets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, all these different things. And I felt like it missed it a little bit. I felt the show had all the elements to do all those things, and it did a little bit, but not quite as much. And the last big thing, I felt the finale was kind of disappointing to me. I felt episode 5 was such a huge, great like ending, like Loki and Sylvie are together. They're using new powers. They open up. We're finally at the castle gates. We're about to like, oh, what's going to happen? I almost feel like they should have ended the season there. If they did, I would have been both frustrated because I was like, what's behind the gate? I want to know. And then at the same time, I would be like, oh man, I can't wait for the next season. I feel like episode 6 was a little bit mundane, a little bit anticlimactic because it had so much exposition dumping and things like that. That when I heard there's a season 2, that's cool, but I was like, I'm not quite as excited as I would be if it had in episode 5. Real fast, a few things about episode 6. I like He Who Remains. I like the guy who plays him, Jonathan Majors. As you guys have talked about, a lot of people think he is Kang the Conqueror or some variant of him. And we know he's going to show up in the next Ant-Man and the Wasp movie. So all that's cool. I just felt like they could have done a little bit more with him. Again, he just gave a lot of exposition dumps. It would have been cool if he was somehow bringing them through time, or if he had been a character that was all throughout the episodes, like even in the background, like lurking, and we find, oh, it's that guy. Or if the reveal had been a character that we had met before, I would have had more investment in him. I felt with him just being who he was, I was like, who's this guy? Like, you're introducing him the last half of the last episode. Okay. Like, and I thought they had opportunities to do like some crazy wow moments. Like when the elevator opened up, wouldn't it be like crazy if it was like, Tony Stark sitting there? You're like, what? And it turns out to be an illusion or something. Like, I feel like season 2 of Mandalorian ended with like this crazy stuff happening because the character shows up, and don't want to spoil that if you haven't seen it. And I felt like this could have been like that wow moment and could have done some other stuff. So I felt the 2 choices that Sylvie and Loki had in the end were a little bit contrived, like either kill the guy and everything goes to chaos, or take over and run things exactly like he did. Like, I feel like they could have taken over, but still like
he
done
pointed
more
that
to
out.
it. What was that?
He pointed that out. He said you can take over, tell them who they really are, run it how you want. So no, he gave him the freedom to run it differently.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good point. I felt like that final scene was just, again, anticlimactic. I like the battle between Loki and Sylvie. I thought that was really cool. But again, I think I was expecting more. And I think it just kind of left me, was like, it was okay. So I think that's why I didn't really stick the landing for me. But what did you guys think of it?
Right there.
Well, I think you do make a good point that there's a lot of talking in the last episode. But I think the reason that John and I have noticed that it's not really done that great in response for some people, but other people have thought it was amazing, was sort of like who is like super into comics. And I know that, Derek, you are super into the comics, but I also know that you don't like having a whole lot of exposition in one setting. So that makes sense to me. But I think people who were like trying to figure out who this guy was, probably appreciated that exposition because they were able to like start piecing the clues together. Like John and I were listening very carefully to what the guy was saying and being like, oh yeah, all signs point to Kang, but this doesn't feel like Kang. This doesn't seem to be Kang based on how we know. And so that caused a lot of confusion that then led to this great reveal of when Loki appears at the TVA again, and then all of a sudden, like, Kang has taken over everything, and it is the Conqueror Kang, not the docile Kang they met in the End of Time and all this stuff. And so
Like
I
sitcom
thought,
King.
what?
We got sitcom King.
Sitcom Kang.
Yeah, it feels like he's like just a comedic bit. I don't know. It was weird.
But I think the just encountering like Conqueror Kang right off the bat wouldn't have made very much sense, and we needed an encounter kind of like what he had. I think, yeah, maybe having it be the finale was a little bit awkward timing, but I just remember that the final scene when Loki comes back to the TVA and like no one knows who he is, and then he sees this giant statue, and instead of it being the timekeepers, it's Kang. You're like had this oh crap moment, and that's where it ends, and that was kind of the climax cliffhanger for me, at least.
I think that's a really good point. I think for those who don't know who King is, or for me, I know King of the comics, and when he was talking, I was trying to figure out who it was, and he does stuff like the Conqueror, stuff like that. I looked it up, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's probably that guy. I think because of that, when Loki comes back and sees a statue of King, it's like, again, who is this guy? Why is he important? Like, if it had been a statue of Sylvie, like, whoa, she took over. Like, I felt there's a couple other things that might have hit a little bit better for me, but and yeah, it's cool that they brought King in, and I like the exposition. I think it's just that the exposition was so long, and they're just sitting talking, like kind of show don't tell. It'd be cool if like take us to those scenes, or like intersperse it in the episode with some other things happening. I think that was kind of more of my issue with it.
Yeah, you guys both make good points, as you always do. So to balance your points, as I always do, instead of taking this question seriously, I will simply say that my biggest complaint about the Loki show is that at no point did Owen Wilson's character Mobius go, wow. And I think that might be the first thing he's ever been in where he never says wow. And it really broke my heart.
He would have said wow if he got to ride a jet ski.
Oh my goodness. He would have been like, wow.
That should have been the like mid-credit scene or whatever.
That would have been amazing. Oh my goodness.
Hey, there's a season 2. There's a season 2.
There's still hope for Mobius, yeah.
Start writing your letters now.
I'm really glad that we found out that people who got pruned didn't just immediately die, because I really like Mobius, so I'm glad.
I think that was some of the things that the show did do well. Some of the twists, like when Morbius died, the same with I was like, I really like the character now.
And it was just again, so sudden, like
yeah.
And
then when Loki does, you're like, okay, something's going on. Or like the reveal that the 3 timekeepers were, automatons. I like that. To me, that's very Doctor Who-ish. That's very like, who's the man behind the curtain? That part of the series I really enjoyed. So. Yeah,
that was actually really weird for me. Like when they went into the timekeeper chamber and they were talking to him, and I'm like, Marvel's CGI is better than this. Like their faces look so weird.
Yeah.
Like and then
they spent all of their budget on the first 5 episodes. When you're in the finale, it's like, what? Oh man. Well, we were talking. I mean, so much of the conversation around Loki ends up being about the last episode, because it's the climax. It's where everything is building towards. It's the culmination of where the show has taken us, and a lot of it centers around this interaction between Loki and Sylvie, who is female Loki, and that interaction, that fight, dispersed with the conversation they were having, was a really compelling moment for both characters. And I think I heard all of us liked that interaction, where they were basically fighting over what to do, before she finally bests him and does what she wants. And in that moment, there's a point where it feels like Loki has given up, where he realizes that she's set in her path. And he says something along the lines of, because you can't trust anyone and I can't be trusted. And it's almost like, this is our impasse. This is our thing. We can't, go any further. But then even after that, he still tries. He still does one last thing. He teleports himself right in front of her blade, and she actually stops. She doesn't kill him in that moment, which I think also shows that she actually does kind of care for him. But going back to that really last poignant thing that he said, that you can't trust anybody and I can't be trusted. There is that theme kind of reflected all throughout the entire show, as Loki, who is the god of mischief, finds himself, oddly enough, trying to get people to believe him when he's telling the truth. He's the god who cried wolf a million years in a row, and now suddenly he's being honest with people and everyone thinks he's lying. And there's a few times where because everyone thinks he's lying, he just starts lying in a way to try and get them to the same point anyway, because he's just like, he can't get people to trust him. And so trusting in general is, I think, sort of a complicated topic. Trusting other people, being trustworthy people who are people of our word, trusting God. There's a lot to unpack there, and I think that especially someone like Sylvie, when we hear more of her story, we haven't heard all of it, but what we've heard so far, she's a person who's gone through pretty traumatic life. She's dealt with a lot of things. It's reasonable to see why Sylvie doesn't trust people. I mean, we see the TVA show up and take her as a child when she's playing with a couple of dolls. And then when she asks Renslayer, when she asked Renslayer, like, why did you take me? What was my Nexus event? Just like Thanos says to Scarlet Witch, when he tells her, I don't even know who you are, she says to Sylvie, I don't remember. Because Sylvie's thinking, this must be such a powerful moment. I was just a child. Why did you take me? And she's like, I don't know. Wasn't important to me. And which is just a kicking her while she's down kind of thing. But if you look at that scene, and this is my interpretation of what happened, she's playing with a couple of dolls. And what is she doing with the dolls? She's talking about one of the Valkyries swooping in and saving the day. She's not acting like a Loki. And what I mean by that is she's showing compassion. She's talking about the hero in the story, one of the Valkyrie. Similarly, when Loki and Sylvie are starting that Nexus event on Lamentis, what are they doing? They're starting to care for each other. Lokis don't care about anyone but themselves. So my question is, was Sylvie's Nexus event her becoming someone who is compassionate for other people? Because in the TVA, she screams for the TVA guards to help someone who seems to be in distress, which is not something that we ever see a Loki do, show compassion to someone you don't even know. So was that her Nexus event? Was she just a Loki that cared too much? And I don't know. That seems possible to me, but I also know that when people care a lot about other people, sometimes they open up themselves to them and they get hurt. And when they get hurt, they start building up walls. They stop trusting and they stop letting themselves be compassionate and care for other people. So that was a lot that I just kind of dumped on you guys. But under the topic of trust and trusting others and being trustworthy people and all of that I just kind of unraveled in front of you. Whichever you wants to jump in and share your thoughts, feel free.
You make some really great points, I think, about Sylvie and like the dynamic that, she's really driven by revenge, but there are a lot of glimpses of her compassion. But she really has a hardened heart, and it's not something that's gonna just like change overnight. And I think if it had just like changed overnight, or in that one conversation with with Loki, it probably would have cheapened a lot of what she went through. It's kind of like the conversation with Judge Renslayer and B-15, when B-15 is in that prison, and Renslayer is like, I need to get to the end of the world or whatever, what she's seeking after, and then B-15 is like, she's gonna get to it before you do because you only want it, but she needs it. And it just goes to show how much revenge and that concept just can eat away at you and take over your life. And it just is a really hard thing to come back from. And it's nice and comforting to know that if that's something that you're struggling with, like, nothing is too tall an order for God and the Holy Spirit and helping you through that and processing that and getting past that need for revenge.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to like move on too far from that point. I have more to say, but you can just come back to me, I guess.
Well, I think that's a great point. And I know we had kind of thrown around some verses earlier. But I think something that kind of speaks to what you're talking about right there about having your heart kind of hardened by past hurts and trusting people. I think that's very relatable. I think that to varying degrees, most people experience that, right? Most people have been hurt by someone that we trusted, and it's affected decisions we've made, sometimes in very minor ways where we get over it very quickly and we're able to heal and move on. Other times it can linger for a while. And there's a verse in Ephesians 4, two verses actually, verses 31 and 32, that I think are really great about this, the importance of not letting our hearts stay hardened. And if we can prevent them from getting there in the first place, taking it to God and having him do that work in you, but even once the hardening has happened, reminding ourselves of what the Bible says here, to get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. And I think that's such an important reminder that God doesn't expect us to forgive full stop. He expects us to forgive as we remember that we've been forgiven. He expects us to love as we remember that we are loved. You know, he doesn't require anything from us that he doesn't himself give to us. So if he wants us to forgive, he forgives. If he wants us to love, he loves. And so we're not on our own. We're not trying to do this on our own. You know, God is with us. Christ is inside of us. He lives inside of us. And I think that's a great reminder for me, and it's a great encouragement as well that there are things that I need to do that God expects me to do better than I'm doing right now. But he doesn't just give me an order and shut the door. You know, he's there to help me get through it and to do it as well.
Well, we were talking about in another segment about Black Widow, how like no one is too far gone, and it reminds me of the time loop. That's what it's called, the time loop that Loki was stuck in with Sif, yeah. And there comes to a point where he apologizes and he says, you know, I crave attention and I'm scared of being alone. And then she softens a bit and helps him up and says, you are always going to be alone, and walks away. And I think she said something else, but that was the main point. She was driving home. Yeah. And how, like, in our earthly mindset, it is very easy to be like Sif and be like, okay, I recognize that you like said you're sorry, but you reap what you sow kind of thing. And I think a lot of people are kind of stuck in that mindset, like, I've done too many bad things, I've reaped what I sowed, I pushed away all these people, burned all these bridges, I'm too far gone. And I think Loki is wrestling with that, where he's believed that, I am not trustworthy, and he's still trying to earn the trust of others and do good, and recognizing what is right. But the nice thing is, when we do it in real life, not in the Marvel universe, we don't have to do it in our own strength like Loki is trying to do. We may be at that point where we feel like we've burned a lot of bridges and we can't be trusted, but we're not trying to do it on our own. We can do it with God's help, as you were saying.
I think that's great, what you guys said. Just to summarize real fast, I think that, as John mentioned, when Loki says that Sylvie, your issues, you can't trust people, and I'm not trustworthy, I think that's my favorite line, that definitely in the finale and from the whole series, because I think it's so true to life. We've talked a lot about Sylvie, and just to hit on her real fast again, Sylvie has every reason to have guards up and have walls up and things like that. But I think one of the reasons the Bible encourages us to be tenderhearted is because if we keep a wall up all the time, we try to protect ourselves from bad things, but we also don't let good things in. And so I think instead of having a wall up, we need to have more of a gateway, or have a door where we decide when to open it and crack it and let someone in, and when we decide to keep someone out. And so I think Sylvie is not allowing herself to experience good stuff because she's so close off and so afraid. And the same thing happens to us in real life. We go through different times, and some of us have been through abuse or hard times, and walls being up is 100% understandable. And not everyone is trustworthy, but I think the encouragement is that there are some people who really do care, and some people who really do want to help us, and no one's going to be perfect. Yeah, sometimes people might let us down, but there's a difference between someone who intentionally and constantly harms you and someone who is trying to do the right thing. And so I encourage anyone who might know that they have walls up, or who might be going through some of that stuff, to talk to someone. Definitely pray and talk to God, of course, talk to a trusted friend, talk to a counselor about why do you have your walls up. And again, there might be good reasons for having walls up, but again, work on having a doorway so you can open up and let good stuff in as well. And so you can also decide what's a healthy boundary, what's not, when should I open up my gates, when I shouldn't. Loki, real fast, again, Loki has an issue. He is untrustworthy, and that is because of all the actions he has done in the past. And there's a great verse in the Bible, Proverbs 22:1. It says, choose a good reputation over great riches, because being held in high esteem is better than silver or gold. And the Bible reminds us to keep a good reputation, because if we live a life in a way that is, not encouraging, not beneficial to others, when we are trying to actually help someone, they may not believe it to be true. And so it's important for us to realize that people are always watching us, and how we live our life is kind of one of the biggest testimonies we have. And so the way we treat people, the way where we tell the truth or not, people have reputations. And so it's important to the best of our ability, to try to be a person that is known as being kind, that is trustworthy. So when there is an issue, someone feels comfortable coming to us, and we know that we can come to someone else as well. So
yeah, no, that's a great point. And it says that in Proverbs, but also I'm reminded because no big secret, I'm a pastor. Derek, you've been in ministry for most of your adult life, if not all of your adult life. You were a pastor for over a decade. So, one of the things that we think about sometimes is it's in 1 Timothy chapter 3, the qualifications to be an elder or a leader in the church. And the very first one the first thing that's listed is that they must live above reproach. Other words, they must have a good reputation and maintain that by doing things that are righteous and avoiding doing things that are unrighteous, not living in such a way that would cause people to question that. And so, in Proverbs 22, it says, choose a good reputation, held in high esteem is better than silver or gold. And we see an extension of that in 1 Timothy, that, as a leader, you have a responsibility to live above reproach, to live in such a way that if someone is going to accuse you of doing something that is sinful or wrong, it's going to be an absurd accusation, and everyone's going to see that it's absurd, because of course you wouldn't do that. You didn't do that because you live righteously. And that's not easy to do. It's actually really hard, and it's the first requirement. It's the first thing in this list. And I think that underscores the importance of doing that, to live rightly, is very important. So, good thoughts, guys. Any other thoughts? Any final thoughts anyone wants to share? Good, bad, or otherwise? All right. Well, thank you, Derek. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for watching. You are awesome. And I know we always say that we love you, and it's true. I promise. We really do. Even though I don't know you, Stephen. But thank you for watching. And like I said, as always, we love you. More importantly, God loves you. And if your name's Stephen, you better comment, because that's amazing. And we'll see you next week. Take care. And he's like, okay, so this salad is Asgard. And he's like, no, it's not. It's my salad. And he's like, don't mess up my salad. And he's like adding a whole bunch of salt. He's like, I can do whatever I want. I can do a bunch of stuff. No one's ever going to know. And then he takes the pepper. He's like, I can just keep doing things and doing things and doing things. And I can just do whatever I want in Asgard. And it won't matter, because Ragnarok, you know what Ragnarok is, right? And